There's a silent weight most of us carry, one we rarely name. It isn't fear, shame, or even trauma. It's the quiet exhaustion of living a life built around who we think we should be. We chase goals not because they fulfill us, but because we're afraid of what it means to stop. We say yes when we mean no, smile when we want to scream, and keep sprinting toward a version of success that doesn't belong to us. And what's worse, most of us don't even realize we're doing it. This is the tragedy Carl Jung quietly pointed to, the danger of living from the outside in. When we organize our identity around expectations, parents, teachers, cultures, we slowly forget who we were before the world told us who to be. It's not just in grand gestures of self-betrayal. It's in tiny compromises that pile up, unnoticed, like dust collecting on a mirror that once reflected something honest. The problem is, the longer we pretend, the more the performance becomes indistinguishable from truth. We start mistaking adaptation for authenticity. We call survival success, but somewhere underneath the surface, a tension grows, a quiet ache that no achievement can soothe. That's the psyche's way of tapping on the glass, whispering, "This isn't who we really are." And that whisper is not your enemy, it's your invitation. Most people wait for a breakdown to start listening, but that ache is the early sign, the soul signal that something real wants to emerge. Yet instead of turning inward, we double down. We silence the discomfort with overwork, numbness, validation seeking. We decorate the prison instead of unlocking the door. We think transformation begins when we reach our goals, but true change begins when we pause long enough to ask, whose life am I really living? Jung understood that the self isn't found, it's reclaimed. It's what remains when we peel off the layers of obligation, pretense, and fear. And it doesn't require perfection, it requires truth. The tragedy is not that we get lost. The tragedy is that we call the maze our home. And what liberates us is rarely some external breakthrough. It's the simple, courageous moment when we stop and say, "This isn't me. I want more than this." That moment changes everything, not because it solves the problem, but because it names it. You don't have to burn your life down to begin again. You only have to stop pretending it fits. Real change rarely announces itself with trumpets. More often, it sneaks in as discomfort, a quiet sense that something no longer fits, even if you can't name what. You wake up one day, and your life still looks the same on the outside. Same job, same relationships, same goals pinned to your wall. But something feels hollow. A subtle dissonance hums beneath the surface, like a note slightly out of tune. You're still performing, still achieving, still functioning. Yet the joy is thinning, like breath in cold air, there, then gone. This is often the moment people mistake for failure. But in truth, it's a beginning. It's the moment the old identity starts to crack, making space for something more authentic to emerge. It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like confusion, like losing interest in what once defined you, like realizing you've climbed a mountain only to see it wasn't the one you wanted. And it's terrifying. Why? Because the person you've become has kept you safe. Even if it's been exhausting, even if it cost you your aliveness, it worked. The image, the achievements, the persona, they formed your armor. Taking it off doesn't just feel vulnerable, it feels like death. But here's the paradox. The self you've constructed to survive is now the very thing blocking your ability to live. You start noticing the trade-offs. How saying yes to what pleases others means constantly saying no to yourself. How striving to be good quietly killed your joy. How approval feels like a substitute for connection and never enough. And still, you hesitate. Not because you don't want change, but because your nervous system has been trained to equate unfamiliarity with danger. Even joy, when it's new, can feel suspicious. The unfamiliar calm after a lifetime of chaos feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is where most people retreat. They return to the comfortable patterns, dress them up in new goals, rebrand their same pain with better language, and call it progress. But if you resist that urge, if you stay with the discomfort instead of soothing it, something incredible happens. The illusion begins to unravel. You begin to notice that many of your choices weren't really yours. They were echoes of old fears, of childhood rules, of cultural scripts you never chose. And as those threads loosen, you feel grief, not just for what you lost, but for how long you betrayed your own knowing. That grief is sacred. It means you're awakening. Jung believed that becoming whole isn't about perfection. It's about integration. It's about meeting the hidden parts of yourself with compassion instead of judgment. You begin to see your anxiety not as a flaw, but as a messenger. Your sadness not as weakness, but as a call for return. And slowly, you remember something ancient within you, something unshaped by expectation, untouched by performance. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. There's a quiet revolution that begins when you stop trying to fix yourself and instead begin to listen, not to the noise, not to the endless self-help instructions or the societal mantras of do more, be more, but to that quieter voice within, the one you've ignored for so long that it now speaks only in subtle aches, in the tightness behind your ribs, in the fatigue you can't explain. This is where transformation actually starts, not in a moment of glory, but in a moment of stillness, when you finally admit, I don't want to be who I've been pretending to be, not anymore. You begin to question everything, the roles you've played, the dreams you inherited but never questioned, the approval you chased like oxygen, and at first, it all feels like collapse, because the scaffolding you built to survive, the ambition, the productivity, the control, it begins to fall away, and without it, you feel naked, like standing in a house with no walls, watching the wind blow straight through your history. But this is not ruin. This is revelation. The collapse is not your destruction. It's the burning away of the false self, the persona you thought.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your feedback means a lot, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
You needed to be loved, to be safe, to be accepted, and in its place, something else begins to rise, not with certainty, but with truth. You start making different choices, not loud, dramatic ones, but quieter rebellions, saying no when you'd usually say yes, resting instead of proving, speaking your truth even if your voice shakes. These are not just small acts, they're tectonic shifts. They signal that you're no longer orbiting someone else's gravity. And yet, this rebirth is not glamorous. It's lonely. It's raw. People around you might not understand. They might try to pull you back into the familiar dance, the roles you played so well for so long. They miss the version of you that made them comfortable. But you are not here to be comfortable. You are here to be real. And realness will cost you. It will cost you approval. It will cost you performance. It will cost you the illusion of certainty. But in return, it gives you back your voice, your vitality, your power. You realize that authenticity isn't a final destination. It's a practice, a daily choice to stop abandoning yourself, to stop explaining your existence, to stop negotiating your worth. And slowly, the world begins to feel different, not because it changed, but because you did. You're no longer scanning for cues to perform. You're not begging for belonging. You're building it inside yourself. Jung spoke of individuation as the path to wholeness, not becoming someone new, but becoming fully, unapologetically, who you've always been beneath the noise. And in that quiet space, something sacred grows, a life that doesn't just look good, but feels true. As you continue walking this unfamiliar road, no longer chasing a version of yourself others invented, you'll notice something unsettling: the silence. No applause, no external metrics, no clear milestones, just the sound of your own feet on solid ground. This silence can feel like emptiness at first, like something's missing, but in truth, it's spaciousness, the absence of noise that once drowned out your own voice. It's in this quiet that you begin to hear your soul clearly, often for the first time. You realize you no longer need to be seen to feel real. You no longer need to explain your value to feel worthy. You are no longer available for negotiations on your identity. But then, a different fear creeps in. If I no longer belong to that system, that identity, that old story, then who am I? The truth is, for a while, you won't know. You'll feel like a blank page, stripped of your former roles, without the anchors of performance. Your ego will panic. It will beg for something to latch onto. It might urge you to build a new version of yourself, faster, shinier, more approved. But don't rush it. Let the emptiness do its work, because from this blankness emerges something deeper, a self no longer shaped by fear, but by presence, a self that doesn't need to be defined, only discovered. This is not reinvention, it's remembrance. You remember the parts of you that were silenced, the dreams that weren't practical, the joy that was once labeled too much, the grief you were told to hide. All of it returns, not as shame, but as sacred evidence of a life fully fought. And it's here, in the gentle reclamation of all that was once denied, that freedom finally arrives. Not the kind of freedom sold in self-help slogans or Instagram quotes, but the quiet, undramatic kind, the kind that lets you sit in your body and feel safe, the kind that makes you weep, not from pain, but because you realize you no longer have to carry it. You learn to live without performance, to speak without strategy, to connect without conditions. You stop managing people's perceptions like it's your job. You stop scanning rooms for approval like a radar on overdrive. And in doing so, you begin to radiate something rare, peace, not perfection, not power, just peace. A steady, unapologetic presence that says, I am here, I am whole, I do not need fixing. This is what changes your life. Not a single epiphany, but 1,000 tiny choices. Each time you say, I will not abandon myself. Each time you stay instead of run. Each time you soften instead of armor up. You don't arrive at a final version of yourself. You arrive at yourself again and again, with grace, with patience, with curiosity. Because the work is not to become someone else. The work is to remember you were always enough, and that remembering, that gentle homecoming, is the realization that changes everything.